Welcome to the Connected Teamwork Podcast by Growth Leaders Network. How do we learn to truly thrive together? How do we stay connected to our authentic selves, each other, and our purpose as a team, especially when challenged? How do we unlock the deeper levels of group intelligence? Enjoy this episode of the Connected Teamwork Podcast and learn practical tools to evolve the connectedness of your team to its next level.
Welcome to the Connected Teamwork Podcast, where we help teams and leaders connect more deeply to themselves, each other, and their purpose. I am your host, Hilke Faber, together with my host, Carson Heddy. Carson, how are you today?
Hilke, wonderful. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. We're going to talk today about the first of the 12 connected communication practices and a little bit of context about that. When I think about connectedness, creating connectedness at work, part of that is our internal work. And also a lot of that is how do we engage with each other in conversation? How do I show up? How do I listen? What's the energy I bring to a conversation? How do I share what I really think? Do I share what I really think? How does a person respond to it? How do we get to a place of actually having really open conversations that create impact together? That's what the 12 connected communication practices are about. And they're organized in loosely 4 pieces. The first few are about centering. We're going to start with that today, thinking about how do I bring my best to a conversation. Then the second piece is about opening. How do I share what I really have to say in a way that's humble, accessible, and honest? And then the next piece is about asking. How do I listen, really listen deeply, and maybe through the listening emerge more truth together? And then the fourth piece is about exchange. How do we together sit in a conversation and are on the same side of the table and think together about how do we move forward? So the little acronym we use for that is COAX: center, open, ask, exchange. And yes, we cheat a little bit on the X for exchange. So we're going to talk today about communication practice number 1, which is about intentions versus expectations. So to get into that, I invite you to think about a difficult conversation you need to have. And I can think about a difficult conversation I need to have. It's with a vendor who helps me to create a new course program, brochure. And I love working with this vendor. At the same time, they are doing things not always in the way that I want them, in the quality that I want them, or in the timely way that I want them. So I need to have a conversation with, let's call her Mary. And so when I'm in my expectations, I'm going to think about how I want the conversation to end, that I want her to agree with me, that I want her to like what I have to say, and that I need to feel good about it. And all of these things are expectations. And when I'm in these expectations, what's going to happen is I'm going to be less honest, I'm going to be less open, and I'm going to be less purposeful. So focusing on what I can control, and we call this the 1% principle, as opposed to the 99% that I cannot control. Any situation always has plenty of stuff in it that I cannot control. There's always the 1%. There's always a 1%, the metaphorical 1% of what I can control. And in conversation, for me, that's about my values, how I show up. I want to be honest. I want to be open, respectful, and I want to be purposeful. But I cannot control whether the conversation goes well, whether Mary will like it, or even if we get to a good outcome. I can move towards it, but I cannot control it. So Carson, if you think about a difficult conversation you need to have, and you focus on your 99%, what you cannot control, what happens with you?
Well, I can speak from experience, Hilke. That's a great question. Yeah, I think it's very easy to get lost sometimes in our own, priorities and agenda, right? And we've got to be very cognizant and mindful of the audience. It's key. First, I like to get grounded and anchor on why the intention matters so much, right? Because when I'm showing up and when I'm getting lost in a meeting, it's often about my own ego, or it's about my own my own intentions. And so I think what's key is to make sure we're grounded in the priorities, the desired outcomes for the collective, and that we keep going back to that. Because it's one thing as well to set out on a certain trajectory with a meeting, but frankly, also, like, sometimes they go off the rails proverbially, and it's up to us to steer it back to the mission. And that's why it's critical that we're grounded on the intention of every meeting, because we ultimately may have to steer it back to that intention to be very clear and crisp and keep it from getting out of control. And often it does this because everybody in a meeting has their own goals and priorities and ego. And sometimes the need to be seen or heard can trump everyone's frankly prioritization of what should really matter. So I think that's why it's critical that we're setting the tone early, realizing, as we've explored on this show many times, that communication and connectedness are very intertwined. When you enter into a conversation with the intention to serve and to listen, and to understand and to uplift, that's where things are coming from, and starting off on a better foot. Remember, ego is loud and intention is steady. So instead of focusing on the ego piece of how we will appear in the meeting, intention is focused more on the outcome that we're trying to create for the other person and ultimately for the team. That's where we have to go.
And that sense of intentionality creates a different energy. So, because we communicate with each other all the time, even if we don't say a word. 93% of our communication is not what we say. It's our nonverbals, our tone of voice, the energy we bring to the conversation. So when we go into a difficult conversation, especially, I think it's important to regulate ourselves. So a little self-regulation. Talked about this as going to the beach, so breathing, encouraging ourselves, accepting that it's going to be harder, choosing consciously how I want to show up as opposed to autopilot, and then thinking about what's my high road. How do I really want to show up here? In that sense, also a different atmosphere for the other person to speak into. Because we all know, like, if somebody starts a conversation with "Hey, good to see you. What's up?" We give probably an answer like, "Oh, fine." But if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, how are you? I want to check in with you." Very different energy. You are likely going to respond differently as well. I think about my coach, Janelle Reynolds, who I work with every week for the last 20 years or more, actually, almost every week. And when I talk to her, I sense in her energy and a total intention to be of service and to be truthful. So being with somebody who just wants to be 100% truthful, deeply honest, and deeply kind, and deeply of service, it's like somebody puts a mirror inside of me and says, "Hilke, how are you going to show up?" So me setting an intention actually challenges the other person to be intentional as well, without my having to say a word. So what is your experience with intentions, Carson?
Yeah. This is very timely because, I'm part of a relatively new organization, right? So there's a lot of people figuring out, where are we relative to where we were 6 months ago? What are some of the conversations that we need to be having? And, there's unique challenges, and you can't gloss over that, right? Intention has to be paramount in each conversation. I recently had a meeting with my team where I just kind of came on and said, "Look, guys, today I'm not going to record the conversation. I want people to be as candid as possible. These are some of my overarching observations. But you're in the thick of it. You're grappling with the day to day. And what I want to emerge from this conversation with, my intention is, I want to be at the pulse of what really matters to each and every one of you. This is what I'm hearing and seeing, like me being transparent. You can't ever rely on people to necessarily lead the charge in being communicative and being transparent. It's funny, I liken it to, and I liken a lot of leadership analogies to my kids. Like sometimes my middle kid will say something along the lines to my younger kid that, she's not going to start cleaning up the mess until the younger kid pitches in. And it's like, no, you've got to lead by example. And I look at leadership the same way. I've got to be the one who leads in being transparent and communicative and setting the tone. That's all about setting the tone of intentionality, is, making sure team, like, hey, the recording is not on today. I want you to be candid, but these are the things that I'm seeing. These are the questions that I'm hearing. This is what leadership's talking about right now. But I want to hear like your actual practical, day-to-day observation, because ultimately, like, I'm the conduit from you to our leadership, make sure that we're all connected in this sphere. Intention matters tremendously, just basically because tough situations, challenging situations, ambiguous situations, they can all be diffused or made easier if we can lean into them, as opposed to running away or assuming that somebody else is going to deal with it, or and that's the thing. I think sometimes we as leaders, we shy away from the tough conversation, or we hope that things are going to fix themselves, or, just because it's not on fire, it's like, well, I can let this skate another day. No, like, I've learned we need to lean in. If we hear something might be challenging, or, is causing a morale issue for someone on our team, or it matters to somebody in the team, we've got to lean in and meet that moment. So often our team members are grappling with things, and we've got to go beyond the glossy aesthetic too. Like, if somebody says like, hey, I'm dealing with some challenges, I had some, some personal challenges or whatever it is, like, that may completely derail, the stated intention that I may have even for a meeting, because at the end of it, my intention is I want to be well connected to my team member. And if that means I need to pivot and address, how I might be able to better support them as a human, that is ultimately the intention that we're after.
Intention gives you a bigger space, a stronger foundation, as opposed to an expectation where you're almost like enslaved. Like, I need to get there, and everything else is an obstacle. And the people around you will feel that. So if you have a place of power, people will autocratically fall in line because, hey, the guy wants to go that way. Not a conversation. That's a dictate, right? If I want to have a conversation, I need to be in this space where I can be very centered. And this is about presence. And to me, that's the ground of all intentions. I can always be present. I ask myself at the beginning of any conversation, how present am I right now on a scale from 1 to 10? Not to beat myself up, but to go, all right, come back over here. Attention, come back over here, come back over here. And even during conversation, sometimes my attention wanders, come back over here, come back over. And from that place, when I'm centered, my view becomes wider. I feel more flexible. And insights, it's interesting. Like, I become a better listener to my own insights. So I listen to my little voice inside better. And I'm also much more with the other person. Like, I'm able to do that for the other person. We'll take a short break. After the break, we're going to discuss more. How can we use intention, especially in conversation when things don't go well, when they're in the middle of the conversation and it's not working. So see you after the break.
You are listening to the Connected Teamwork podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Do you want to learn more about building the next level of connectedness in your team? Please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
Yeah, so how do we build that sense of connectedness through intentionality? especially when things don't go well. So I'm thinking about the conversation that I was in a while ago, where I was asking for something from a vendor, and I could tell on her face that she was not happy with it, like not happy with it at all, like quite unhappy. And I could feel my crocodilian expectations wanting to sort of appease her. And then I took a deep breath and it's like, okay, so what am I here for? I'm not here to make her wrong. No, I'm here because I believe that we're creating a product together that needs to be high quality. And I also believe that we have some communication between us that we're not being truthful with each other. So actually we need to talk. And with that came a sense of quiet. And it was putting myself a little bit on the edge of discovery because I didn't know how she was going to respond or react. What I found in this case is that she actually was a little defensive for a little while. And that energy stayed for the rest of that conversation. So it was not like one of those happy ending stories, like, yay, it all went well. However, and I've been in her seat, so it's not like Hilke is the angel and got it all figured out. What was interesting is because I didn't give in to the temptation of trying to fix her or making her wrong or even forcing the conversation to go well. I just stayed in what I felt was true. It's like, hey, I think it sounds to me like we are not able to agree on what we're going to do with this. I suggest that both of us think about this and come back in our next conversation in 2 days. And the next conversation, I must admit, I was a little anxious, like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen because the product needs to be delivered, right? So, it's going to happen. I was quiet. I chose to be present, and I felt that she was present. And then when that reactivity was no longer there, it was a much easier conversation to what you said earlier, Carson, right? It's like the big drama kind of left the stage. Yeah. So how is that for you, Carson? When you think about being in a conversation when things don't go well, how does your intentionality help? And how do you do it?
Very important question. And there's a finesse, right? I mean, I think we got to be mindful, first off, that none of us woke up one day knowing magically how to do all this, right? I mean, there's a lot of trial and error. I know in my own experience of, going in thinking that things have to be a certain way and almost trying to force it to be that way, and then seeing it implode and getting feedback from people to say, hey, like, this, you didn't think about this, you didn't think about that. We have blind spots inherently. And that's why it's so critical. When I think about a meeting that I'm in and, there's audience members in these meetings and, wanting to keep things moving, but also be intentional and outcome focused. Not only do you want to, I try to pre-publish the agenda when I can so that people know where we're going and where we're rowing together. But also like I'll keep reminding myself. And in fact, it'll often be the title of the meeting so that like when I'm on Microsoft Teams, as an example, I can see like, this is the title of the meeting. I need to keep going back to that topic. And are we talking about this topic and are we staying focused, right? But the other thing is people want to feel like they matter. They want to be seen. They have a perspective. They have an opinion. And those perspectives matter. I mean, look at the very reasons sometimes that we feel disconnected in the world. It's because of the sometimes shunning and disrespect or frankly, dismissal of other people's perspectives and opinions. And that causes anger and rage, and rightfully so, because people don't feel seen and heard. And so as a leader, I try to always be very cognizant of, how can I solicit these perspectives? I'm going to share my perspective. Yes. But I can't force the outcome. And that's why it's key to make sure that, we understand and that we continue to evolve our approach. But that we understand like what stake does this other stakeholder have in this meeting? What does it mean to them? What does the outcome mean to them? And if we don't know, ask. And that's why constantly I will check myself in these conversations. And I can liken it to any relationship that matters. my marriage, with my kids. I don't have the need anymore to be right. In fact, that's the key element. Is it isn't about me being right. It's about us collectively figuring out what's the right way to go about delivering this outcome. And let's be real, there's often multiple ways to arrive at an outcome. We want to do it in a way where, again, we're in the boat and we're all rowing together. Because if we're not, and we're rowing against each other, what's going to happen? You're going to sit still. You're going to capsize. You're going to sink. And that those metaphors align very directly with meetings and with teams. We've got to make sure that we're rowing together. We've got to make sure that everybody's crisp and clear on the outcome. But we've also got to make sure that everybody knows their role. And if we may be a leader of a team, nevertheless, or maybe we're an individual contributor who has a leadership role or a position in any given situation, whoever has that leadership position has to make sure we're all clear on roles and who has this strength or who has this responsibility. There has to be a sense of mutual accountability. Everybody's got to have some skin in the game, but everybody also has to feel included.
Absolutely. It's that balance between, or integration, not even balance, the integration between everybody has a need to be seen and heard with, that's the we, you could say, with the it, which is what's the purpose we are needing to achieve or we're intending to achieve here, to, hey, I also need to be honest with you. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to agree with you or say things that you might like. I had a conversation recently, Halloween evening on my street, and I'll keep the content out of it. But the gist of it was, I ended up sitting next to somebody who has politically the opposite view of me. And when I first sat next to her, I could feel her moving away from me, like she did not want to talk to me. And I did want to talk to her. So I centered myself because I could see my expectation, my attachment, wanting to change her, like recruit her to my side, right? So nope, don't do that. But I want to actually, my intention is to connect human to human, because that to me is really important, especially in this time where we seem to easily lose sight of that we're all humans together, trying to figure out how we live together and have pretty strong opinions about how to do that, which we have quite different opinions these days. And then we forget in the opinions that we're actually human beings trying to figure this out together. So that was my intention, to actually be there, to be present, and to inspire in some way, without being higher, but just be together, to be together. So I asked her about something, and immediately, and it was just a personal question, like, what city do you like, where you're from? And immediately there was a political response about what was wrong with the governor and the mayor of the city. And yes, I engaged in that conversation. No, I wasn't the most skillful. And then I could feel my blood turn to boil. I was like that. And I came back to my intention, because I asked myself, who do I want to be right now? Regardless of what I just said, or regardless of what she just said, who do I want to be? Like, we're sitting outside, we're in Phoenix, and the stars are out and all this. And like, if I was sitting on the star and looked at those two humans, how do I want to show up in this moment? And I realized, geez, I just want to be humble. I don't have all the answers. I just want to be really honest and really kind. And so what came out of my mouth, like, I realize I'm sad about our interaction just now, and I don't have the answers. I just know that I want to connect with you. She wasn't standing up and giving me a hug or anything like that. Actually, she didn't say much at all. However, in me, something shifted. Like, I went from feeling out of alignment, agitated, to feeling whole again. Wow. And that's part of being in the 1%, because otherwise we're going to go into this 1% intention and just think that If we keep talking, if we keep sending quote unquote positive energy, everybody around us is going to eventually give us a hug or applaud with what we're saying. Sometimes that happens, but often it's not happening. So the question is, what do we do in those cases? Yeah.
It was John F. Kennedy that said, let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future. I think far too often, and I get why, we're tricked by these social media algorithms to gravitate toward these very specific niche talking points. And you hit the nail on the head earlier, Hilke. We don't all have all the facts. And there are absolutely gray areas, and there are ambiguous situations where there are pros and cons to just about everything that can be done. And so, if we decide that I'm going to rally behind and die on this hill, while my best friend is going to rally behind and die on this hill, now suddenly we're enemies. And I think sometimes that is one of the biggest missteps that we make as a human race, because we're not really that far apart. And it all goes back to intentionality and outcomes. It all goes back to the exact topic for today. It's very quick in a meeting that it can devolve into a negative situation if we don't handle that balance, as you perfectly summed it up, correctly. And that's why it's key that even if I've been in leadership meetings where I've seen two people on my team start to go at it, and realizing, team, look, hey, I admire and respect, you're passionate and you care about us getting to this outcome. We're not far apart. Like, let's realize we're all on the same team. We're all after the same thing. Let's get back to, this is the outcome, the desired outcome for this meeting. Joe, Mary, like I appreciate your perspectives here. Let's realize, hey, there is no necessarily right or wrong way of doing this. There are ways that we can kind of integrate. Let's kind of get back to getting grounded in the goals for this meeting and the desired outcomes. Like, as a leader, sometimes we have to make sure that we keep that steady hand on the wheel and we bring it back to center, because it's very quick that situations can devolve. They can get polarizing by people that really aren't that far apart.
I so agree.
They want the same things in the grand scheme of things, but we almost we come with like this pretense or like this preconceived notion that it has to be a certain way. Just like we saw some social media meme this morning that says something horrible about the political party that we don't think we're a part of. And so now everybody who believes that anything that political party believes is now our enemy. It is not that way.
I'm thinking about how our ego works as we conclude this podcast. Is once I've decided that I'm right, I will continue to need people who are wrong. And so even when we've discussed and concluded today that nobody's right and that we want to actually find a solution together, and when we find the solution, if I'm still in the ego energy of I'm right, I'm still looking for somebody to find wrong. And so that to me is part of letting go of the 99%, because having to be right is part of the 99% expectation. If we can let go of that, we show up empty and full of integrity, empty of expectation and judgment and being right, and completely full of integrity and service. Carson, final words from you on the topic.
Yeah. Look, couple simple steps that people can put into place today. Ask yourself, what is the real outcome that I hope we all walk away with from this meeting, and make sure you set that tone early. Also, identify emotional tone that you want to hold. In my case, I always try to focus on calm, curious, and collaborative. And finally, remind yourself of the relationship dynamic. This is a person. It's not a transaction. And if we can show up seeking to serve and support and see others more often and lead the way, model that behavior for our people, it is much more likely that we will be focused on that 1%.
Thank you for listening to Connected Teamwork Podcast. This was episode 74. I was here with Carson Heddy. My name is Hilke Faber, and we are here at the Connected Teamwork Podcast, where we help leaders and teams connect more deeply to themselves, each other, and their purpose. See you next time at the Connected Teamwork Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Connected Teamwork Podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Take a moment to reflect on what you learned today that can help build your team. Also, if you like, think about one of your team members and what you appreciate about them. Let them know. Enjoy connecting more deeply to what is great about them. And see you next time at the Connected Teamwork Podcast.